Hey folks, this is Chris Johnson at Living Waters Fly Fishing. Today we're going to talk about something that often gets overlooked in fly fishing circles, and that is sinking lines. And I don't really blame anybody for that. Everybody who starts in this sport typically starts out with a weight forward floating line. And if you come into this shop as well, we're going to tell you the same thing. A good 5 or 6 weight, even a 4 weight if you're fishing a creek or something like that, with a very well matched weight forward floating line is what you need to get started. However, it does not solve every problem you're going to run into on the water, whether you be fishing reservoirs, deep rivers with a lot of current, the Texas coast. There's a number of places where the floating line just doesn't get the job done as well. And so today we're going to talk about what sinking lines are really for. We're going to solve a few problems with them and kind of give you some information on what these things really do and where they're best applied. And then also we want to talk a little bit about some of the things that confuse folks. So number one, a sinking line does exactly what the name suggests in that it does sink. But there are different things that lie within the attributes of each line. So an intermediate sinking line, you'll hear that term a lot. That line sinks at about 1.25 inches a second. So it's just barely sinking at a very slow rate. But it does manage to get the line under the surface of the water. It does help keep your fly at depth and fishing in the water column, and can be incredibly useful in a place like, say, the Texas coast on the surf, where you want to actually get the line below the waves, keeping it in the water column, but not dredging the bottom. So actually keeping that where the fish are going to be feeding. So it's very, very important. You also have lines that are full sink lines that are, for instance, different types of line. You'll have a 5-weight sinking line that's a type 6. Well, what is a type 6? Well, it has nothing to do with the weight of the rod. You already have a 5-weight fly line. The sink rate is listed as a type 6, and that simply means that it basically sinks at about 6 inches a second. So type 2 is close to 2 inches, type 3 is close to 3 inches, type 4 is close to 4 inches, and so forth. It's not exact. There's a little bit of leeway on either end, but just kind of use that as a round guesstimate. If a type 6 line is what you're buying, that line, whether it be the tip or the entire line, is going to sink at 6 inches a second, roughly. So the other one that I would mention is a sink tip, where only the front of the line sinks, and the running line is typically a floating fly line. And that's very helpful if you're a beginner, to make sure that you actually have a line that's easy to handle. They're also very, very accurate casting lines in many cases as well, because they transition into that floating line. So let's get started with the Scientific Angler Sonar series. And this is, I think, probably the most technologically advanced sinking line series that's out there. It's what we carry in store as well. This is not the entire series that Scientific Angler makes, but these are the ones that best match our conditions here in the Hill Country and the Texas coast. So to start out with a line you probably haven't heard much about, and that is a clear Camo line. This is actually an intermediate line that's built on a monofilament core. It can be used in cool water environments and warm water environments. Doesn't really excel when it's the hottest of hot in Texas, but it does a great job in pretty much any time but our crazy hot Texas summer of like July and August. But this line is awesome for spooky carp, early season bass in shallow water, and then I do take this to high country lakes a lot to fish for cutthroat as well. So this line is cool because it's actually translucent. It's kind of clear. It has kind of olive, browns, different hues of green that make up the line, but it's actually translucent where you can see through it. So when the line actually sinks, it just blends into the backdrop. The fish aren't going to see that. So it's very, very useful for stuff like that. The other ones that I would mention is we also have a seamless density. This is probably my favorite sinking line that's ever been made. This line is based off the popular MPX taper. So most of you that have bought a weight forward fly line within Scientific Angler, you're going to see a lot of MPX tapers that are going to be sold through this store, just because it kind of plays nice with most rods that have been produced. This taper is pretty much based off that line. So the seamless density is a full sink line, and it comes in 2 weight classes. So you're looking at this right here. This is a weight forward 8 weight, but it's a type 5, type 7. So you've got the back of the line sinking at a 5 inches per second rate, and the front of the line sinking at a 7 inches per second. You're like, well, why would they do that? Well, the whole reason is when a sinking line, if you have one that sinks at the same sink rate all the way through the line, your line's going to be different diameters based on how it's tapered. So at this point, what you have is a line that sinks and pulls that thicker section of line down at the same rate that the running line runs down as well. So you're looking at it basically is going to sink more in a straight line and less of a sag causing you to miss fish and strikes and sensitivity during the presentation. So seamless density, this is a caster's sinking line. If you like to cast, you want to present the fly to a target, you want to be accurate, this is the line. I absolutely adore this thing. I've got it on my, I've got it on my 4 weights, my 5 weights, my 6 weights, my 7 weights, all the way through. I love this line. And I mean, we fished it on the Brazos, we fished it on the Guadalupe. It goes everywhere with me. I love this line. Other line, this is one of the new ones for this year. This is the Trout Express. I love you guys, scientific anglers, if you're watching this, but I really don't like the name of this line because this is a great bass line. Don't pigeonhole it to trout, please. Anyway, sorry, I'm a southerner, what am I gonna say? But the whole deal being is this line is a sink tip line where, like for instance, in the 4 or 5 weight, it's gonna have a 13.5-foot sink head on it. So it's manageable, it's short. In our hill country rivers, that's ideal. And it sinks quickly. It's actually a very, very high sink rate on the end of this line that allows you to get the fly to the target quickly, but still with the pleasure of being able to, use running line that is floating to manipulate the fly and actually fish it. Because 13 feet of line is slightly longer than your fly rod. So pretty much anything that's gonna be in the guides is mostly gonna be floating line while you fish this. Incredibly good casting line, turns over a bug really well. You can roll cast this line in tight spaces. It's wonderful. So I very, very much appreciate them releasing a line that we've very much been needing in the lineup. And this is one that I think has been, I would say, desired for a long time. We've needed a line that had a really short head that really plays nice in our Texas Hill Country tighter rivers, and this is it. Another one that I like, these are triple density lines. And this is actually, you'll notice it's a Sonar Titan, but a triple density can be like an I-3-5, where it's an intermediate type 3, type 5. It can be a hover 2-4, where it's like sinking at like a 1/2 inch a second in the running line. And these are really, really cool lines because these are made to turn over large flies. The triple density lines are great, but the taper is really what sets them apart. That Titan taper, you can cast a fly the size of a squirrel and still get it to turn over. It's amazing. So these are really more for your larger hair bugs, divers, big articulated streamers, things of that sort. They cast them with ease. They cast them a country mile. It's incredible, and they're very, very easy to handle. They do play nicer, though, with faster action rods, so just keep that in mind. This is an oddball line, and a lot of people don't know about this one. This is a Sonar Surf, and it's not actually the line I would choose to use in our Texas surf, but I love this line on the jetties. And it's because the tip section of the line sinks at a type 6. So, I mean, you're moving down about 6 inches a second, and you're typically throwing larger flies on the jetties a lot of time, trying to provoke a little bit larger strike from larger fish in general. So with this line actually has a very fast front section that sinks quickly, and the running line doesn't sink quite as fast. But it's built on a multi-filament core, so in our cooler months, in the winter, for instance, if we have to fish a little deeper on the jetties, this is a great line for that. It's not built on a tropic core, something that's really made for hot weather, but it'll fish in moderate temperatures for most of the year. It's the hottest of hot that this line doesn't play well with, and the jack of the line is a little bit harder to help have that rigidity in saltwater as well. But a great line if you plan on fishing the jetties, especially when it's cooler. And then we got 2 lines here that also, these are built on Tropicore cores. So basically the core of the line is basically the backbone, what gives it its rigidity and its performance and how it performs in hot or cold weather. If you were to take these lines out in cold weather, they look a lot more like a slinky. If you were to take a monofilament core out, it would be a little bit less so. And then if you took a multi-filament core, in hot weather, it would actually just go almost like noodle-like, where it just doesn't have enough rigidity to really perform in extremely hot conditions. So these are really our tropical lines that we use a lot in saltwater or very demanding like boat deck freshwater situations on reservoirs. The Saltwater Intermediate doubles as a great bass line in the summer as well. So I have a lot of great things to say about this. But this is the one that I would use to go fish the surf. Get an intermediate line that sinks just below the surface of the water. It's really, really good for that. And the other thing I would mention here is that this thing casts beautifully. I love casting this line. Very, very fun line to fish. Works great on the lights at night too, because they do not see that line when it enters the lights. You're not spooking fish with a brightly colored fly line. And then lastly, to wrap it up, we have a Grand Slam taper in a clear tip. If you're familiar with Scientific Anglers lineup at all, the Grand Slam's a very popular fresh and saltwater taper designed to kind of go all the way through the lineup. You're going to do tarpon, bonefish, permit, whatever. It's great for that. And we use it for redfish on the Texas coast a lot. This one actually has a clear tip, a little intermediate tip on the very end of the line that allows you to get your flies down just a little bit. This is fantastic for fishing like, channel edges, weed pockets and stuff like that on the Texas flats where you get those little sand centers with the grass all the way around the edge. Great line for that because you can throw the fly in the center of it, let the fly reach depth, retrieve it out, and the tip isn't so long that you're just dredging grass the whole time. Easy line to cast in the wind, and a lot of fun on reservoirs as well. If you're going to work over grass tops and things like that for bass, wonderful line for that. But that's just a quick overview of some of the things that you can use these sinking lines for. And there's even some very, I would say oddball type approaches as well with like the triple density that we mentioned. I was on Lake Bastrop a while back and we were fishing diving hair bugs that were, pretty good size. They were 1/0 bugs. And all the bass were located at, 10 to 12 feet deep on the top of grass beds. We were using sonar to find that out. And we were casting to shallower water, retrieving to deeper water, but the fish were kind of sitting right underneath us. We did the coolest thing in the world. We took the baits, we basically made our cast right up against the bank and let the line sink to depth. The little hair bugs just sitting up there floating nice and neat, and as we strip the flies, the hair bugs dive. It has more of a parabolic type swim path to where it pulls it down. It made contact with the top of the grass. Oftentimes that's where the bass would eat. We'd make contact with the grass and feel the fish load up. And then we'd basically swim the fly back to the surface if we didn't get an eat on that cast. And so that's one of those things that you can take diving bugs, articulated streamers, and things like that and actually change their dive paths and their swim patterns, all by changing the lines you're using. So sinking lines are important. I highly recommend you add a few to your arsenal. If you have any questions about that, just call the shop, send us an email, reach out to us on social media. We're happy to help you however we can. Thank y'all so much for watching and really appreciate you being a part of our fly fishing community. Take care.